because that single question not only changed how I intentionally focused the way that I led, but it also rippled into questions I ask in every single relationship that I have with friends, family, coworkers, and beyond. Welcome to Legacy Lounge, the podcast where you'll discover how to lead with purpose and build a legacy that matters. So if you're ready to step into your full potential, show up authentically for yourself and others, and create a lasting impact on the world, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Hey, welcome back. And today we are talking about a very important question, that literally changed my life. And it did, seriously though, change how I show up as a leader, how I lead in my marriage. Sorry, Drew. And even with our two doodles who, have opinions about everything. So I'm sure you're now wondering, Brin'na, what is this question? Well, here we go. Do you want to be rich or do you want to be right? Now, before you probably say to yourself out loud or to someone else, just like I did the first time I was asked this question, do you want to be rich or do you want to be right? I immediately said, well, I want to be both. Duh. Who doesn't? So sit with me here because this one starts in one of my earliest memories at Target with the best unicorn of a boss ever, Salam. And I was very young in my career, also very confident in my abilities. Maybe a little too confident, But Salam saw something in me that I needed to learn about myself. And I'm super lucky that I learned it early on in my career because that single question not only changed how I intentionally focused the way that I led, but it also rippled into questions I ask in every single relationship that I have with friends, family, coworkers, and beyond. And one day, after I finished proving my point in a meeting with, all the receipts and all the facts and all the proof that I did exactly what I was saying I was doing, Salam just asked me that question by ourselves. Brin'na, do you want to be rich or do you want to be right? And I was like, well, both, obviously. And he just smiled and said, okay, well, I'm going to ask you again next year. And I can't wait to see what your answer is. And you know what? Sure as shit, he did. Year later, same question. And I had the same answer. And again, he asked it a year later. I was super fortunate to work for this guy for about 7 years of my total 11-year tenure with Target. And like clockwork, he asked every year. And this was not in our formal yearly review, but this was just like in everyday conversation. And I think it was like 5 to 6 years of being asked the same question when I just kept saying both and both and both. When I finally understood what was actually being asked. So here's just when it clicked. I was watching another senior leader handle a situation where they were absolutely 100% right. And they did have every fact, every receipt, every piece of documentation imaginable to prove their point. And they could have won that argument in a solid 30 seconds flat. But what I watched that day was instead of pulling out the receipts, they asked very intentional, smart, and strategic questions. And they listened so intently that it facilitated those strategic questions and which ones they asked next. It was incredible. I watched them build a bridge in a huge point of friction in this relationship and in this conversation. And I watched this person who was technically right choose to be rich in that moment. And what I mean by rich is how they chose to influence. They were rich in trust. They were rich in long-term impact and not just immediate point bonus points or brownie points. So rich in influence. And that is when Salam's question hit me out of nowhere like a ton of bricks. Being rich in leadership is not about money. The money is good, but listen to me here. It is about building relationships that can compound over time. It's about creating influence that goes well beyond the authority of your position. And it's about developing a very specific kind of trust that services disagreements. And I want to share a recent example from one of my current clients and a situation that we're navigating through. I was working with a leader, let's call her Abby, who was in this exact situation. I'm not joking. She had every receipt, every email, every calendar invite to prove that she was right in the conflict preparation of going into a difficult conversation with a colleague. And she could have won that. She could have won that argument, hands down, 30 seconds flat, and gone back to the rest of her day. But here is what we discovered together in our coaching conversation. Abby had a choice. She could win this one argument with all the receipts or use the opportunity to help transform this moment into something bigger. Instead of saying, well, here's the proof that I've tried to communicate multiple times, we have worked on shifting to, I really value our working relationship. What communication style would work best for you? I'm open to adapting how we share information if that would be helpful. It was gold. The result, not only did they resolve the immediate issue, but they created a stronger foundation for every single future interaction that they will have. And that is what being rich looks like in leadership. And you know what's really funny is this concept was so transformative that I actually took it and created framework within Legacy Fulfilled to help all leaders make this shift during difficult conversations of friction. And it's called the Rich versus Right framework. And I've got a lot more details and juicy insights to share with us. But the concept of do you want to be rich or do you want to be right includes 20 ways to help transform different leadership conversations to elevate the strategic side behind the intention of the conversation. So I want to share one of my favorite examples from this tool. Instead of saying, well, that's not what we agreed to, which, let's be honest, we all wanted to say probably multiple times. We instead utilize, do you want to be rich or do you want to be right? To come back and flip that script. Help me understand how this aligns with our original goals. I might be missing something. Or instead of saying, you're not following the process here, shift it to, I notice we are taking a different approach here. What insights do you have that led to that shift? Do you see what's happening here? We are not avoiding the hard conversations whatsoever, but we are letting go of our own made up standards of what resolution in difficult conversations can look like and how it shows up. We are all choosing how we show up in these moments, especially as leaders. And here's the thing about choosing to be rich instead of choosing to be right. It is not about being nice. It is about being strategic. It's about playing the long game in your leadership. Think about it. Every single challenging conversation is actually an opportunity, and it's an opportunity to either prove your point or build your influence, to win an argument or win trust that can compound over time. So here's what I want you to do. Before your next challenging conversation, I challenge you to ask yourself, do I want to be rich or do I want to be right? Then instead of pulling out the receipts, the screenshots, the saved photos and the saved pictures and all of that stuff, instead, try one of the approaches in this framework. Start small. Maybe it is turning well, that's not how we do things into, I'm curious what opportunities you see in this new approach. Can you walk me through your thinking? And if you're ready to go even further with this work, I've got the resource ready to roll. I've got 20 different leadership crafted examples that are the number one most common responses in difficult conversations, with prompts to give you strategic insight on how to flip that into a very strategic, beneficial, and helpful question. So the Rich versus Right framework is available for you, and it is designed to help you build your influence, your alignment, and your success without unnecessary friction. Life is hard, and we've got enough friction as it is. Do not let your leadership position of influence have to suffer because of it. Remember, great leaders do know how to be both rich and right, but they lead with rich to ultimately achieve right. This is Brin'na. Thank you for listening, and let's go build some leadership wealth. Oh, P.S. Drew, if you're listening, yes, this does apply to our conversation about Jackson Oliver too. That's it for this episode on the Legacy Lounge. Thanks for listening. And until next time, I am your host, Brin'na Rollins-Williams, encouraging you to lead with your purpose because your legacy depends on it. That's it for this episode of Legacy Lounge, a podcast dedicated to empowering you to lead with purpose. Remember, leadership begins with you. When you're connected to your values, strengths, and authentic self, you show up powerfully for your team, businesses, and everyone you lead. To authentically lead others, you must first lead yourself. I challenge you to consider, how are you investing in your personal growth to create a legacy that you envision? Thank you for joining me in the Legacy Lounge. If this episode sparked any thoughts or inspired action, I'd love to hear from you. I'm your host, Brin'na Rollins-Williams. Connect with me on LinkedIn or other socials, and let's continue the conversation. Remember, your legacy is built one intentional step at a time.